Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel. I am excited to talk about some of the books I read the past little while. Thank you to all those people who gave me suggestions on the last video on how to get over a reading slump. I have tried watching some movies and taking a bit of a break, and what seems to be helping the most is some of the books I have been waiting for and have been on hold for are finally available, and that has been really nice to just read some books that I'm excited about. So let's just jump into some of these books. So the first book I want to talk about is called Betty by Tiffany McDaniel, and this was a suggestion from AJ Dunn over at AJ Dunn Reads and Writes, so I will make sure to link their channel down below. And I really liked this. This was a really good book. This is following Betty Carpenter, and she was born in 1954, and her father was Cherokee and her mother is white, and she's in a small town in Ohio. So that's kind of the setting for our story, and it just kind of goes through the difficulties that this family has as they grow up, and the struggles that Betty has from being half Cherokee, and some of the racism that she endures from people in the town, as well as within her own family, because she looks more like her father than some of her other siblings. And so this is, it deals with some very difficult issues. It deals also with a lot of women's issues and violence against women, and it talks a lot about all of these really difficult, horrible things there's talk about, like incest and rape and animal abuse and death and all these things. But what I thought was really beautiful about this book was that the dad, throughout the book, tells stories to Betty and helps her deal with trauma through storytelling. And Betty, in turn, tries to work through the things that she's seen and she's dealt with and she's learned throughout life by writing it down. And I think that this book kind of gave a lot of power to that in dealing with the trauma. There's a lot of intergenerational trauma and abuse that is handed down from their mother, and I think that this book really handled it. It didn't solve it all, but I thought it really talked about it in an interesting way, and it was a really beautiful book. So I thought it was really good. Was it maybe triggering with some difficult subjects? Yes, so be aware of that if you wanted to pick it up, but I do think it was a really well done book. All right, so I read a book called The Body, A Guide for Occupants by Bill Bryson, and this was interesting. So when you were a kid, did you ever read one of those books that had all the interesting facts about the human body? It was like that for adults. That's what this book was. It just was filled with interesting things, head to toe, about the body, and super interesting, super fun. You get a lot of interesting little tidbits. You feel like you've learned a little bit. It was enjoyable. Enjoyed the book. Now, here are my problems with it. First off, for me personally, not a book I should read. He talks about the ear, and I obsessively spend the rest of the book, I was listening to it on audiobook, and I kept turning it down as low as it could possibly go because I was worried I was going to damage my ear, because he talked about ears and that was all I could focus about. And then I couldn't hear anything, so I'd have to turn it back up, and then I'd have to turn it back down because I'd get stressed about it, and then I'd turn it back up so I could hear it better, and that drove me nuts. But all the stuff, like, if you don't want to think too much about like your body and your fingernails and your ears and your, like, just, this might not be for you. But overall, super interesting. My biggest complaint, though, was just how the author talked about weight and obesity, and I feel like a lot of the ways that things were presented were just not super accurate. So, for example, something that I found to be so wrong to say, at one point, he says, if you did everything the same, and in a year you ate one chocolate chip cookie a week, you would gain over 2 pounds. Now, first off, is that true? No, because every single person is different. that is bizarre. And B, it's just like, I don't know. I'm like, that can't be measured super accurately because everybody's different. How everybody, everybody's bodies handles food is completely different. If I ate a chocolate chip cookie every day for a week for a year, it might be the same as somebody else who eats only one chocolate chip cookie a week. It just seems like the weirdest overstatement to me and something that will make me obsess about it. I was like, no, don't say those kinds of things because it doesn't even seem true. So, I did think that he talked about some things like BMI isn't an accurate or useful guide for most things. He didn't bring that up. But there were times when he'd say things like, oh, there was a study that said that if you have a little more weight, you actually might be more resistant to certain diseases. But doctors don't really care about that. He kind of brushed it off. I don't know. The way he talked about weight, I thought was very unhealthy, and I didn't appreciate it. So, if you are sensitive to those kinds of subjects, maybe skip this one. Also, it did make me a little bit skeptical of the way that other parts of the book were presented on just the accuracy, because I found some of the things that he said to be a little bit over the top and maybe not as factual as he seems to think they are. So, I mean, I ended up like 3.5 stars out of 5. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. I thought it was cool, but there were just like parts of it that I'm like, oh no, that's not quite right. Like something's off here. So I'm not a huge fan of the entirety of this book, even though it was interesting. So I'd seen this book floating around. I think it was on my TBR at one point, and somehow I never got to it. And I heard the channel Gem of Books talking about it, so I added it back and I read the book Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. Now, I enjoyed this book as a Greek myth retelling. I mean, that is great. Very Madeline Miller. It gave me, the whole story of Ariadne, and it was great. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Now, did it add a lot to the myths? Did it really make me feel like there was a so what? No. I got to the end and I was a little like, was there anything else? Like, so what? So what? Where was the, meaning or anything that we got out of this? I just got to the end and I'm like, oh, so the answer is all of them are horrible and they all die. So I kind of wanted maybe more of a spin on the story from the author, but as just a retelling of Greek myths, enjoyable, and I liked it. So it was worth a read. Now, my mother suggested that I read the book As You Wish, Inconceivable Tales from the Making of the Princess Bride. And I listened to this on audio. So fun to listen on audio. You get all of the actors talking about the making of the movie, and you actually get to hear their voices, and so fun. Was this book necessary? No. Nothing so crazy happened in the making of that movie that you needed a book to tell about it. Now, was it entertaining and made me go watch Princess Bride again? Yes. So, if you really love The Princess Bride, you will enjoy this. It will be nostalgic. It will be fun, especially in audiobook format where you can hear some of the actors' voices talking about filming, and then you can go watch the movie and you can say, oh, did you know his toe was broken in this scene? And did you know that this, those kinds of things. That's great. This book was a fun one. It's just not that deep. So I read the book What We Lose by Zinzi Clemens, and it just didn't do much for me. It was, it had the potential to do a lot, but instead, I really don't even know what it was about. It's just like, did it give me anything? Nothing. I don't know what this book was. And so I read it, and I was like, okay, so talking about a little bit of South Africa and being in the middle of being black and white and being in America, but trying to like find identity and meaning, like that. Those are good ideas. Just where were they coming from and where did they come together? I don't know. I don't know if they did. It just, by the end, I got to the end of it and I thought, what was that book even about? What happened? And to prove my point, I went on Goodreads and I pulled up the book and found out that I had read this book in 2019? I read this book in 2019 and completely forgot. Like, I did not remember that I'd read this book at all. So, I've read this book twice, still feel like I got nothing out of it, and I'm pretty sure that if somebody were to suggest this book a year from now, I would read it and still none of it would ring a bell. It's just that forgettable. So, don't really recommend this one because I've read it twice and disliked it both times. And so hopefully I'll go through and look at the books on my Goodreads before reading books again. But yeah, I thought this was just ultimately very forgettable. Well, thank you for watching. And if you have any thoughts on these books, please let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you all on the next one.